Chapter 2 of The Dog Crusoe and His Master. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Allison Hester of Athens, Georgia. The Dog Crusoe and His Master by R.M. Ballantyne. Chapter 2. A shooting match and its consequences. New friends introduced to the reader. Crusoe and his mother change masters. Shortly after the incident narrated in the last chapter, the squatters of the Mustang Valley lost their leader. Major Hope suddenly announced his intention of quitting the settlement and returning to the civilized world. Private matters, he said, required his presence there, matters which he did not choose to speak of, which would prevent his returning again to reside among them. Go he must, and, being a man of determination, go he did. But before going he distributed all his goods and chattels among the settlers. He even gave away his rifle, and Fan, and Crusoe. These last, however, he resolved should go together, and, as they were well worth having, he announced he would give them to the best shot in the valley. He stipulated that the winner should escort him to the nearest settlement eastward, after which he might return with the rifle on his shoulder. Accordingly, a long level piece of ground on the river's bank, with a perpendicular cliff at the end of it, was selected as the shooting ground, and on the appointed day, at the appointed hour, the competitors began to assemble. "Well, lad, first as usual," exclaimed Joe Blunt, as he reached the ground and found Dick Varley there before him. "I've been here more than an hour looking for a new kind of flower that Jack Morgan told me he'd seen, and I found it too. Look here, did you ever see one like this before?" Blunt leaned his rifle against a tree and carefully examined the flower. "Why, yes, I seen a many of them up about the Rocky Mountains, but never one hereaway. It seems to have gone lost itself. The last I seed, if I remembered rightly, was near the headwaters of the Yellowstone River. It was just where I shot a grizzly bar." "Was that the bar that gave you the wipe on the cheek?" asked Varley, forgetting the flower in his interest about the bear. "It was. I put 6 balls in that bar's carcass, and stuck my knife into its heart 10 times before it gave out, and nearly ripped the shirt off my back before I was done with it." "I would give my rifle to get a chance at a grizzly," exclaimed Varley, with a sudden burst of enthusiasm. "Whoever got it wouldn't have much to brag of," remarked a burly young backwoodsman as he joined them. His remark was true, for poor Dick's weapon was but a sorry affair. It missed fire, and it hung fire, and even when it did fire it remained a matter of doubt in its owner's mind whether the slight deviations from the direct line made by his bullets were the result of his or its bad shooting. Further comment upon it was checked by the arrival of a dozen or more hunters on the scene of action. They were a sturdy set of bronzed, bold, fearless men, and one felt, on looking at them, that they would prove more than a match for several hundreds of Indians in open fight. A few minutes after, the major himself came on the ground with the prize rifle on his shoulder, and Fan and Crusoe at his heels, the latter tumbling, scrambling, and yelping after its mother, fat and clumsy, and happy as possible, having evidently quite forgotten that it had been nearly roasted alive only a few weeks before. Immediately all eyes were on the rifle, and its merits were discussed with animation. And well did it deserve discussion, for such a piece had never before been seen on the western frontier. It was shorter in the barrel and larger in the bore than the weapons chiefly in vogue at that time, and, besides being of beautiful workmanship, was silver mounted. But the grand peculiarity about it, and that which afterwards rendered it the mystery of mysteries to the savages, was that it had 2 sets of locks, one percussion, the other flint, so that when the caps failed, by taking off the one set of locks and affixing the others, it was converted into a flint rifle. The major, however, took care never to run short of caps, so that the flint locks were merely held as a reserve in case of need. "Now, lads," cried Major Hope, stepping up to the point whence they were to shoot, "remember the terms. He who first drives the nail obtains the rifle, Fan, and her pup, and accompanies me to the nearest settlements. Each man shoots with his own gun and draws lots for the chance." "Agreed," cried the men. "Well, then, wipe your guns and draw the lots. Henry will fix the nail. Here it is." The individual who stepped, or rather plunged forward to receive the nail was a rare and remarkable specimen of mankind. Like his comrades, he was half a farmer and half a hunter. Like them, too, he was clad in deerskin, and was tall and strong. Nay, more, he was gigantic. But unlike them, he was clumsy, awkward, loose-jointed, and a bad shot. Nevertheless, Henry was an immense favorite in the settlement, for his good humor knew no bounds. No one ever saw him frown. Even when fighting with the savages, as he was sometimes compelled to do in self-defense, he went at them with a sort of jovial rage that was almost laughable. Inconsiderate recklessness was one of his chief characteristics, so that his comrades were rather afraid of him on the war trail or in the hunt, where caution and frequently soundless motion were essential to success or safety. But when Henry had a comrade at his side to check him, he was safe enough, being humble-minded and obedient. Men used to say he must have been born under a lucky star, for, notwithstanding his natural inaptitude for all sorts of backwoods life, he managed to scramble through everything with safety, often with success, and sometimes with credit. To see Henry stalk a deer was worth a long day's journey. Joe Blunt used to say he was all gents together, from the top of his side to the sole of his moccasin. He threw his immense form into the most inconceivable contortions, and slowly wound his way, sometimes on hands and knees, sometimes flat through bush and brake, as if there was not a bone in his body, and without the slightest noise. This sort of work was so much against his plunging nature that he took long to learn it. But when, through hard practice and the loss of many a fine deer, he came at length to break himself into it, he gradually progressed to perfection, and ultimately became the best stalker in the valley. This and this alone enabled him to procure game, for, being short-sighted, he could hit nothing beyond 50 yards, except a buffalo or a barn door. Yet that same lithe body, which seemed as though totally unhinged, could no more be bent when the muscles were strung than an iron post. No one wrestled with Henry unless he wished to have his back broken. Few could equal and none could beat him at running or leaping, except Dick Varley. When Henry ran a race, even Joe Blunt laughed outright, for arms and legs went like independent flails. When he leaped, he hurled himself into space with a degree of violence that seemed to ensure a somersault. Yet he always came down with a crash on his feet. Plunging was Henry's forte. He generally lounged about the settlement, when unoccupied, with his hands behind his back, apparently in a reverie, and when called on to act, he seemed to fancy he must have lost time, and could only make up for it by plunging. This habit got him into many awkward scrapes, but his Herculean power as often got him out of them. He was a French Canadian and a particularly bad speaker of the English language. We offer no apology for this elaborate introduction of Henry, for he was as good-hearted a fellow as ever lived, and deserves special notice. But to return. The sort of rifle practice called driving the nail, by which this match was to be decided, was, and we believe still is, common among the hunters of the Far West. It consisted in this: an ordinary large-headed nail was driven a short way into a plank or tree, and the hunters, standing at a distance of 50 yards or so, fired at it until they succeeded in driving it home. On the present occasion the major resolved to test their shooting by marking the distance 70 yards. Some of the older men shook their heads. "It's too far," said one. "You might as well try to snuff the nose of a mosquito." "Jim Scraggs is the only man as'll hit that," said another. The man referred to was a long, lank, lantern-jawed fellow with a cross-grained expression of countenance. He used the long, heavy Kentucky rifle